Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Ignite, where we ignite important conversations right here on our campus. My name is Aaron Patterson, and I am one of your hosts.
Hey guys, my name is Elise Deschamps, and I am another one of your hosts. Today we are talking about purity culture, or more like toxic purity culture, what it is, and how you know if you're a victim of it.
We just finished our interview with Angie Hong, who's our guest for today. She's really good at talking.
Yeah, I mean, graduated from Duke.
Yeah.
We could have talked for way longer than we
She
did.
mastered divinity at Duke, which you can master divinity,
Also
apparently.
published in the Atlantic.
Anyway, we'll get into
great
it.
stuff.
First, Clarissa. So Clarissa, take it away.
Thank you, Aaron and Elise. Today we have a very interesting topic, and we want to know what students think about Christian purity culture. Let's go! Do you think the opinion on Christian purity on the Seventh-day Adventists or the Christian community is toxic at some point?
I feel like sometimes it can be, depending on the perspective or how it is taught.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people put high expectations on youth nowadays, and with the culture like changing rapidly, there are different expectations from the world, so there's a larger pressure on people nowadays, young people nowadays.
I wouldn't say there's toxicity, but I will say that as long as you do it with someone that you love, then it's meaningful.
Do you think that there's more pressure on this topic on girls than guys?
For sure. There's definitely a lot of more pressure on girls. I feel like there's like a stigma where it's like it's only supposed to be for girls, and like guys are usually like, oh, it's not talked about, or if it's the other way around, it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, he slept with so many or whatever, but when it's talked about with girls, it's like looked down upon for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say yeah, I think there's a larger pressure on girls than guys to act more morally in today's society, for sure.
I also think there's probably a higher pressure on girls than guys. There's pressure on both, but I think that girls have a higher pressure than guys, yeah.
I don't know. There might be more pressure on girls because, you know, we have to dress more modestly, and like guys aren't as like, they're not told as much as girls are because because we like have more to show, I guess you could say.
Do you guys think that the biblical standard is outdated to our time?
No, I don't. I think it's a good moral standard, and I mean, it should remain the same. I think, yeah, it's good.
No, I don't think it's outdated. I mean, the Bible does have different things that relate to context in their time, but I think that is one of them that kind of applies to today, and it kind of has withstood test of time.
I wouldn't say it's outdated. It all comes down to personal preferences.
Biblical standards as in waiting for, marriage in order to know your partner per se. I think that still is very important, especially nowadays, even though it's not necessarily as accepted in our culture. I feel it is still important to, save yourself for them. It's a special connection with them, and I feel like it's important.
Yeah, I think it needs to be more updated, I guess, because it's changing. I mean, it's 2022, so a lot of things changed during that in this time. So yeah, I think it should be updated.
How about you?
I'm not sure. I think it's definitely a different culture. I think we've just kind of shifted what we view modest as, what we view purity as.
If you could ask any expert on this topic a question, what would you ask them?
I guess I would just ask, why is it just asked more onto girls than guys?
You could ask like pastors or people who are, leading the church, like why we put so much pressure on young people who may not have really formed opinions and that kind of thing yet. Yeah, why aren't we educating more?
I'd probably ask them the first question that you asked, if there's any toxicity that has come out of this topic and how we can improve how we teach and educate young people in it.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. So we are spoiled today because we have a special guest from Duke University, graduate of Duke University, Angie Hong. Which, really quick, I have to read this because it was so shocking. 11% acceptance rate. Southern has a 70% acceptance rate. So that is extremely cool. Extremely cool.
That's hilarious.
Well, introduce yourself for our guest. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am a second generation Korean American writer, speaker, preacher, and mostly a worship leader and liturgist. Originally from the Atlanta area in Georgia.
315.
And
I think, I don't know.
and then I have two kids. They are 8 and 11.
Oh.
And yep, I'm married here, and I live now in Durham, North Carolina. I just graduated from Duke, did seminary here. I graduated this past spring.
Wow.
And now I'm doing a bit more writing, working on a book, and I started a company for worship and liturgies, and then I'm doing a grant project through Duke Leadership Education.
You're on it. You're busy.
Awesome. Well, that
Wow.
concludes the interview. Thank you so much for coming.
That's all we needed.
Yeah.
But we are here today for a reason, and what kind of actually our first introduction to you was we were scheming like topics on what to talk about, things that were like important and like that were present here at Southern on our campus.
To the campus.
And I stumbled across your article that was published last May, I believe, or last March, in the Atlantic about purity culture. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Could you explain what exactly purity culture is?
Wow, what a question.
Yeah, seriously. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and also do it in 1 word or less.
Yeah, in 1 word.
Yeah, I know, right? No, thank you for that question. I think it is a really good question, actually, because people kind of think it's like this has mostly to do with women and sex, keeping abstinence. And I think what this past year has shown, and like just throughout the years has shown, is that it's a much bigger thing than that. It's a culture of purity, saying this is sort of like the essence of a good believer, which is somebody who is not a sexual person, doesn't think about their body or hates their body or tries to transcend their body, and somebody who just almost doesn't live in this world enough to really be involved in the world in a way that sort of detaches them, but in ways that are problematic and alienating to God's people.
Right.
And so when I think about purity culture, I think about that, like this sort of sense of some people can transcend all these things and just sort of be like these holy spiritual buildings,
super pure,
bodies, yeah,
perfect,
super pure,
untouched.
yes. Yeah, who don't, think about their bodies or sort of hate their bodies. And I think ideally, yeah, that would be amazing, to not have
a lot
these
less to
problems.
worry about, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that it even though it sounds like so good, I think it is can be really problematic in that it becomes like this exclusive club that some people can never be in.
Yeah.
And a woman, especially in this world, can do all the right things, and then things happen to her, and then they're out. They're out of that exclusive club, and it causes a lot of shame. It causes a lot of guilt, and they are shamed by those who want to really ascribe to purity culture. So that's a very multifaceted answer, but I do think it goes beyond like just abstinence.
I mean, it's such a complex thing because it's not like an argument about what's necessarily right or wrong when it comes to sexuality, but more of like what is hurting people, like what culture, what like sort of things going on is actually more damaging than it is.
Well, and it starts at a super young age. I mean, we all have the sort of the Christian group, well-meaning, well-intentioned Christian group that came, the drama club, to our schools and did the guy took the flower from the girl and crumpled it up and then threw it on the ground. Then the girl had the flower without any petals and held it up to the audience and said, "Does anyone want this?" And no one raises their hand. So it's from a young age, and like you think about it and it's like, oh, whatever. But when you think about the flower being like a young woman, it's a pretty awful metaphor.
Yeah, seriously.
Are they still doing that?
I don't know. I feel like I remember that from when I was little.
Last time was junior in high school, not college,
Really?
not college, high school. So 4
Wow.
years ago.
I
Yeah.
didn't go to it. Actually, different story. My high school is a different story. Okay, well then, in that case, like, what was your first introduction to the concept of purity culture? Because you write about like feeling these feelings of shame and like having those certain experiences that were very negative and quite traumatic, if I can say that for you. Or at least like something that will stick with you in the way that you view yourself. So what was your first introduction to purity culture, and can you maybe expand for our audience like what sort of experiences forced you in that direction?
Yeah. I think force is a very appropriate word.
Serious.
Well, I think I really did ascribe to it. Like I said in my article, there were a few books around the time that I was, when I was little, that were making their way through our church groups, our friend groups. And one that I really loved, like so much, was Lady in Waiting. And I know that's still in print today, I believe, but I love that book. I read it so much because I wanted so desperately to have a life that was really grounded in Christ. And I wanted to grow in my faith. I wanted to be a godly woman. And I had an idea of what that would look like for me and what it should look like for everybody, you know. And I thought that book was really great in terms of trying to understand it in terms of relationship. I think there are a lot of like women out there who would get caught up like in relationships that weren't healthy, or like have a string of relationships. And although I was never really looking for that kind of life, like I just wanted like to marry the one man that the man that I date is the man that I'm going to marry, is what I always thought. But it was just all these entanglements just kept happening to me and my friends. And at some point I just looked around and was like, none of the people around me are really living this out, but they say they want to, and they're judged, they judge, or they are judged for not living this particular way. But in fact, like none of us are living this way. And what I saw was with the men, something would happen. They would get in a relationship and something would happen, but they would all of us are told to forgive him, and they would sort of rise, like in leadership, or they would become the pastors or the leaders of the church. And these women, opposite direction, they would sink further down. They would be cast out. People wouldn't talk to them, or they would have to like leave the church, or, all that stuff. And so I just kept seeing that and was like, so this is just affecting different people in different ways. Yeah. And for people like me, it's like, I don't stand a chance. I didn't stand a chance to like ever reach that sort of ideal Christian life that I was really taught to aspire to. I just realized that it was just not going to happen. And so when these sort of things happened to me, the first thing I thought was, it must be my fault. My life is over. I'm just a worthless, like a crumpled flower or whatever, I was just thinking that so much. And I just was feeling really, really worthless. And I think there was the healing journey was really, really difficult for me, because there's all these things in your past and the present, and all these, you're trying to digest all these things and wondering why it didn't work out for me, why it didn't work out for you, even though you tried so hard to live in these ways. And then you just realize, oh yeah, like it's kind of stacked this way. It's kind of built this way to allow certain people to continue to rise, and some people continue to like fall down, even though the beliefs are, the same, the course is the same or whatever.
And I remember reading that in the article, that I think it was in reference to abortion, that the woman would have an abortion and the man would just rise up in leadership, and then the woman might even leave that church or the church as a whole. Was that what it was about?
Yeah, there were a lot of instances, and after I wrote this story, so many more people came to me and told me their story. So I know this is very, very common, right? Where a sexual relationship would happen even though they were preaching and teaching abstinence and purity and all of that, but they would be having, like cheating on girlfriends or, having multiple relationships at the same time. And so I had quite a few friends who got pregnant or that had to have abortions, were forced to have abortions by the boyfriend to keep things secret. I even had people where later the boyfriends came back and said like, oh yeah, they asked me about this and I can't lie to them. So like you messed me up, like you messed up my career, and they would like come back and blame these people. And I mean, I'm laughing because otherwise you would cry. It's just so sad and very, very ridiculous. And then you're like, is this God's will? Like, is this really how it's supposed to go for us? I don't know.
Right. And I mean, it's just kind of like this whole like this purity is like under the guise of like completely, well, it's not under the guise of unrealistic expectations, but there's super high expectations of particular people, specifically the women in the situations, at least in these examples that we're using, and like no accountability for the perpetrators. And almost like you were saying, like they're giving more ground and more power to the people who are doing the damage.
Yeah, I remember reading something like that in the article. It was saying something, it was your fault because you were what you wrote, China doll, and that you needed to present yourself difficult, and you felt guilty for what other people were feeling or thinking, other people being men in interactions with you.
So
that's right.
Yeah. So to go off of that, what were like the first steps that you took away from those toxic ideas about yourself?
Yeah, how do you escape that?
Well, any day now, I will. No, I'm kidding. One thing that I had to do really was to understand that it wasn't my fault. That took years. I mean, that took years, which shows how ingrained those beliefs are in our culture, in church culture, unfortunately. Just to believe that it's not my fault that these things happened. Also, that I'm not alone. I thought I was suffering alone. I thought that I was so just bad. I just was a bad person. I was just inherently bad and worthless. And it took a long time to come to grips that no, I'm actually a part of a larger system that I'm sort of the villain in, no matter what. And so the deprogramming of that is it's really hard, when you're taught that way. I received a lot of help. There are a lot of loved ones in my life that were constantly just saying like, it's not your fault. This is not your fault. This is not your fault. And then hearing stories from other people was very, very helpful. When I went to seminary, very, very helpful to understand like biblically and theologically how all of this works, putting terms to it. Like, oh my gosh, there's actually a name for this phenomenon, like ornamentalism, which I mentioned in the article, is the act of people in dominant positions of power. They kind of treat you like these objects that have these like China doll features or exotic features, and they make their minds about your character before you even have a chance to prove yourself or say anything. So understanding these systems has been so helpful. And yeah, hearing stories from others and us sort of banding together has been very, very helpful.
So I have one more question, and then we'll wrap up. But I really do want to ask, how do we teach our young people, young men and young women, to break this cycle? How should we be raising our young men and young women?
As a mom.
I know. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think we all know, like, we try to respect everybody. We try to love everybody, love your neighbor, Jesus, Bible, pray, all these things. I think for me, where I'm at right now, as a concrete example, I'll offer this. Something about learning and understanding the love of God and embracing Psalm 139, right? Like you are created and formed. How you may know it in your head, you may have heard it 1,000 times. Where do you feel it in your body? Like what makes you feel that way? What are the people, like what are the words? When do you feel that way? And if you just kind of revel in that, like take time to revel in that and really know that in your heart and in your body, in your soul and your mind, I feel like anything else that comes up against that, manipulative leaders or people who want to have power over you or anything that tries to mess with that feeling of love and disguised as God's love or God's will, I feel like there should be enough of a contrast to feel when it's off, where we listen to our bodies and we're like, no, this isn't it. This isn't right. Like listening to your intuition and knowing that it's your body's trying to tell you something. Yep. And that's really like the Holy Spirit nudging you like, this isn't my love. This isn't it. But learning to trust that.
I love that.
Great answer.
That's so good.
Well, we fixed it. Good. Good.
I feel like this is the perfect time to come full circle. If you could give your younger self, the person who was in the depths of this toxic purity culture, one piece of advice or any piece of advice, what would you tell her? What would you say to her?
Ooh, I would say to her, it's not your fault and you're not alone. That's it.
Well, Angie, thank you so much for being on today. If people want to find more of your stuff, follow along with your story and what you have coming up next, where do they find you?
I am on all social media channels, literally as my name, Angie K. Hong, Angie Kayhong. So that's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I mean, all of them.
Got it.
Just look me up.
Amazing.
Perfect.
And if our viewers want to read the article that we referenced to so much in this conversation, it's on The Atlantic. And if you look up The Atlantic, Angie Hong, it should be one of the first links.
And we'll stick it in the bio under this video as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Angie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, seriously so much. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Ignite. It was a good one.
It was a super good one. And make sure to stay with us because next week is going to be a little bit different. And we're going to try and set the tone for Ignite Live, which will be the first weekend of March, feature a celebrity guest, live music, and honestly be a surprisingly great time.
So it's going to be a good one. Next week, you guys will be in the spotlight. So until then, bye.
Bye.